So this week on Tab Talk, I've asked my friend Net Lamb, who I work with and is also a friend, to join me because Net asks the best questions of anybody I know. And she is also a traveler and just moved into, or is actually in the process of moving into, a tiny house. So she shares my love of tiny things and particularly tiny living spaces. And she's asked me questions in the past about travel, camping, and my tab. And she was very excited about my new tab and wanted to ask me some more questions. So we thought it would be fun for Net to join me on Tab Talk and ask questions. So thank you so much for joining me, Net.
My pleasure, Jen. I always love talking to you because you always have such good information for me. It's better than going to Google.
Let's not make that a habit. We love Google.
We do love Google. So my first question, Jen, I was thinking about all of the conversations we've had, and I've never asked you, did you grow up camping?
That is a great question because a lot of people did grow up camping, and I did not grow up camping. My parents really, that was not something they enjoyed. I don't believe we ever did it once. As a matter of fact, my younger brother and I tried sleeping out in the yard a couple times, and I don't think we ever made it through an entire night. I did camp a couple of times with my best friend when I was a kid. Her family had a pop-up. And then the next time I did any type of camping per se would have been when I worked at a summer camp. I lived in a cabin. It was camping, but it was, I had a hot shower every night and we had cabins with that and electricity. So I don't know that counts. I tried a handful of times to do some tent camping, and it really didn't thrill me. The whole setting up the tent process was not fun. Sleeping on rock was not fun. And I didn't really pursue it much until I got into landscape photography. And then I wanted to be close to the subjects I was shooting because I actually almost hit an elk one morning early on my way into Estes Park. Yeah, elk ran right in front of me. It was so close, I couldn't believe that I didn't hit it. I actually stopped. When I stopped at my destination, I looked the vehicle over. It was rental because I was sure there was no way I could not hit it. It was right on the bridge leading into Estes Park. If you've ever been to Estes Park, there's that beautiful lake. And I think it must have been 4:00 in the morning, maybe even earlier, because it was a September sunrise and I knew it was going to take me a while to hike up. I was going up to Dream Lake, and there you go. So when I started camping a little bit, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could have a camper someday, something to get me off the ground. I started with a rooftop tent. I think you know that. And then I had the opportunity to buy a tab, which I never thought I would, honestly. It was so adorable. I thought it was something, other people have. That's great, but not me. And so here I am today.
Well, I wondered about that. That was going to be one of my other questions was, what are the steps from not being a camper to owning this tab camper? You don't just wake up one day and say, I want to own a camper. What were the steps that you went through to get to where you are today as a tab owner?
It's funny because some people do wake up one day and say, I'm going to buy a camper. And they go and buy it, an impulse buy. And
that seems like a bad idea to me.
Yes. Sometimes it sticks because people fall in love with it, but more often than not, we see those campers for sale, or even people who put a little thought into it. Is it what they thought it was going to be? For me, you know me, we're a lot alike in that we do a lot of research on something before we move ahead with it. So I had a lot of research, and I had narrowed it down from to the tab, the A-liner, which is sort of a pop-up, hard-sided EP tent style camper, also fairly light. And then also there was a company making trailers out of Canada at the time called Live in Light that had some really nice pop-ups that were aluminum frames, so you wouldn't have a lot that you would with the traditional pop-up. So I was interested in those. The tab was always my favorite. I just didn't know if I'd ever be able to swing it, and through some circumstances, I was able to buy one, and I was so thrilled. It was one of those pinch me, I can't believe this is happening to me type of things. So
Exactly. Because it feels like a big deal. Like the other thing I've always wanted to ask you is like, I'm really intrigued by this, a woman traveling solo with a camper of any sort. Like that feels very intimidating to me. Like I don't even know where I would start. I feel like I'm not that kind of person. So give me a pep talk, Jen. Like you can do this because I did it and this is what I did.
Well, I know you saw my video with Amanda about women who travel, so you know we're out there.
Yeah.
I would say this. I had this thought today because you also know I had my recent little injury.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking about is connecting my trailer and, the fact that it doesn't really require strength. It doesn't really require mechanical skills. It requires curiosity and problem solving skills, which I know you have in abundance. So you would be totally fine. As a matter of fact, if you're using your strength to connect your trailer, then you're not doing it right. It really isn't about muscle. It's all about physics and making, little small lessons that you can learn to make it simple for yourself. But there are women in their 70s and 80s towing taps. So you could definitely do this now.
Wow. I'm impressed. So the other thing I've been thinking about is I don't really have a vehicle that can pull any weight. So like that feels like a big deal to get the vehicle, get the camper and all of that. So I'm sure you did that in some series of steps. Tell me about that.
I did. And what you'll learn is, a lot of times you don't do things probably the best way the first time you do it. And that's true with my vehicle. I had a Jeep Wrangler, 4-door Jeep Wrangler at the time. And on paper, it met all the specs. It said it could tow 35 pounds. A cab is like 1,800, 1,900 pounds. Back then, I think now the tab is probably, I can't remember exactly, but between 2,000 and 2,200 pounds. Still not very happy. So the Jeep was fine on paper. What I experienced was it was fine for the most part if I was doing short distances on mostly flattish areas.
Wow. Yeah.
I drove to Colorado and I hit Kansas on a 100-degree day against a headwind. And even with a transmission cooler, the engine ran hot. So I have to pull over, turn off the air conditioning to let the engine cool a bit. And then I'd tow through the mountains and I'd be the one in the far right lane behind the big overweighted semis, slowly crawling up and down. It had no power whatsoever. So I think the lesson I learned is you want to get a vehicle that will tow probably twice what your trailer weighs.
Okay.
So you have room to breathe. And I highly recommend getting a vehicle that has a factory installed tow package. You can add a hitch, you can add the wiring, the brake controller, but it just isn't the same experience. When you get a factory tow package, sometimes you get trailer sway control, sometimes you get the brake controller installed. In my case, I get some trailer sway controls, auto leveling. So I have an air suspension in my vehicle and it levels automatically because the trailer weight will tend to pull it down maybe a half an inch to an inch. And you're going to get factory installed cooling for your engine and transmission. And that really makes a big difference. You can get away with a minimum requirement type of tow vehicle, but it won't be long before you want to upgrade.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense. So another question I have is, so I am married. My husband probably never really thought about camping at all. We've camped, we've used tents and that kind of thing. But just the thought of owning a camper and dealing with the maintenance and all of that. So what are the little things I need to be saying to him? It's like, we can do this. It's not that big a deal. Like, just talk about the responsibility of owning this thing.
Yeah, well, I always say it's not like a crock pot. You can't fix it and forget it. It does require some maintenance. I make sure, and I don't do it, a lot of it myself, if I'm honest. Yeah. You can take it to an RV dealer or a utility trailer place to do some of it. Somebody who's handy. I think your husband's fairly handy, so he probably could do a lot of it. You want to check the caulking. You want to check the caulking. That's not rocket science. Yeah. You'll want to inspect the brakes from time to time. Every 9,000 miles or 6,000 miles, I like to get the bearings repacked and the seals replaced.
Yeah.
And those, you want to check the tires just like you would on a car. Those
right.
Yeah, those are really the big things. Other than that, it isn't a ton of maintenance. Now, things will break. It's like we joke in the tab world that these are like rolling earthquakes as it bounce down the road. You know, everything's shaking around, so the screws will wiggle loose, and you got to take a look at those to make sure they're tight. And things go wrong. These are more like a house than they are like a car. So I think you go into it with the idea that you're going to have to spend some money on maintenance and repair. It won't shock and appall you when something goes wrong.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, because I would have thought it's like a car. So to your point, you know, how a house takes regular maintenance, like you're always fixing something on a house. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Are the campers that you use, the tab campers, are they can I find them? Like, I've never even gone looking for one. Like, how do you even go about finding a retailer? Are they just everywhere along the East Coast, across the country? That kind of thing. I only know yours. And I was in Colorado a couple weeks ago and I saw the baby tab, and you call that what, the tag?
Yes.
And so it was so cute. And I thought, wow, that's really little. And then you explained to me that it's a smaller version of a baby brother of yours. I'm like, okay. Because I was worried. I thought, wow, I didn't realize it was quite that small. So I've never even seen them around this area. Like, do I just go start looking for retailers, huh?
The nuCamp website has a list of their dealers, and that's one of the best places if you're looking for a new trailer. If you're looking for a used one, sometimes you can find one at a dealer if somebody's traded it in. Yeah. There's actually a publication that's a website now called RV Trader. It's like Auto Trader, but for RVs. Sometimes you can find it there. There's actually a Facebook group for people who are selling their tabs and tags.
Of course there is.
There are over 5,000 people in that group, if you can believe it.
I believe it.
I help administrate that group, and we've had, I can't tell you how many people every day. I mean, you've seen the stats. RV sales are through the roof this year. They're in high demand, and I see people selling their used tabs at really good prices for the sellers.
Yeah, I was talking to a man today. He came to clean my carpet, and he was saying you can't find RVs of any kind. Like, they're just not available. They're being snapped up. All kinds of outdoor equipment. So people are recognizing, I think we're so tired of being inside, we just want to get outside however we can, and it's a good way to do it. Family friendly, that kind of thing. I mean, there's just so many benefits. So yeah, I was thinking, wow, it's probably a bad time to be thinking about trying to find one.
But you can still find them.
Yeah.
The dealer I bought from in Columbus, you know, the day I bought my tab, they had 6 nuCamp products going out the door. So there are still trailers coming in, and it's a great time to probably try to find a used one, because a lot of people are upgrading too.
So Jen, now that I've moved into a tinier space of my own, I because of my friendship with you, I've started like looking up space-saving ideas, what people do who live in RVs, or, you know, there's like websites dedicated to just that. So what are some of your tips? And I know you're probably pretty minimalistic. I believe that you're pretty minimalistic anyways. You don't have to own a lot of stuff. Is that true?
Yes.
Except for photography equipment.
Yes. Yeah,
you got your things. Yeah. So living, like, especially those 3 months, living in the small space for 3 months, how does that go? Like, what are your tips for making that manageable so you don't go crazy? Plus, was it hot? Were you in a hot area?
So that's a really good question. When I arrived in Colorado, it was transitioning from early spring to late spring. I arrived just after Memorial Day. I was at a high altitude. I was a little over 9,000 feet. So it was still fairly,
so it wasn't super hot.
But by the time I was wrapping things up during the day, it could get up to 80 degrees. That's not, out there, 80 degrees is nothing. You don't have the humidity. Right. I'd open the windows, turn on the fan, and I would be fine. And at night, It was not hot at all. The air was so dry. It was so beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah.
But, one thing I did is I tried not to overpack. I mean, if you have a small trailer, you can't overpack. And I tried to focus on what I needed to work, what I needed to be able to do photography. And I did laundry once a week. And I could, so I had about a week's worth of clothes, probably a little more. And I had some coats because we did do some travel in very cold areas.
Yeah.
Mount Evans, for example, you need a winter coat even in July when you're at the top.
Yeah. Wow.
So
wow.
You do have a range of clothes when you're doing something like that, but you learn to, I had mostly T-shirts. You can wear that with anything and just throw a sweatshirt or a jacket over. So you figure out what will layer well.
Yeah. So, I've learned that as I travel too. Like when I started traveling internationally 20 years ago, I was the kind of person who wanted to do it in one of the little day packs. And initially it was a disaster. I didn't start that small, but I am down to that these days. I travel with a carry-on, and you figure out the clothes that work. I can go from 20 degrees up to 90 degrees and still be in my little backpack. And I feel pretty proud of myself when I do that. So it's just something you learn over time. Like, what do you need? What can you mix and match and all of that? So I'm sure it's the same way living in a small space like you were that summer or anytime, even for your weekends. Like, what's important? What do you really need? And what's just, fluff? So yeah, I'm enamored by the idea of living in a tiny space. Well, that's how I ended up in this house. I said that to my husband about tiny spaces. And he's like, oh, and I was enamored with the idea, but I wasn't really ready to do it. Here we are. So you just make yourself do it. You start getting rid of stuff you don't need. But you have to do. If you don't have space, you don't have a choice.
Well, and you make sort of bargains with yourself. I realize there's a risk in not having this with me. If I absolutely need it, I'm willing to go buy it. Exactly.
And I talk about curating. Like, I only have so much room for books, for example. So if I bring in a new book, I have to get rid of an old book. I have to curate my collections. And it sounds really fancy and sophisticated, but that's what you have to do. Like, what are you willing to give up if you're going to buy this new thing? So it's working. We'll see. We're on week 2.
I think my sister-in-law wants to know what thing I'm going to give up now that I have some new photography equipment.
Exactly, right? Have you figured it out?
I'm thinking about leaving the fridge that I have in the back of my Jeep behind. I'm not 100% committed to that yet. The fridge in my new trailer works so much better that I think it might make sense, but that fridge in the back of my Jeep takes up a lot of space. However, it allows us to go longer without going to the grocery store, too.
Exactly. There's something to be said for that.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll see what you do.
I'm still figuring it out.
Aren't we all still figuring it out? Yeah, just life in general. We're still figuring it out.
You know, the other tip I would have, my sister-in-law travels with me quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, what about 2 people? Is it too much for 2 people in such a small space? And I would say if you're going to spend a lot of time inside the trailer, it might be too much for 2 people.
Right, but that's not why we travel.
That's right. Neither one of us, neither you or I would do that. And my sister-in-law and I are gone often from morning till night. And we're just maybe making dinner and, in my case, showering. And then we cook dinner and go to bed.
Clean up and go to bed, right, and start over the next day. Yeah, that's the same. I don't travel even without a camper. I don't care about the hotel room so much. I do. I want it to be clean and basic, but I'm not there for the hotel room. I'm there for whatever drew me to that area. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, you're just kind of shelter, something, a roof over your head and a place to cook a meal and a place to lay your head.
Well, what other questions do you have for me tonight?
Well, that's what I have for you tonight, Jen. So thank you for the opportunity to ask. And I'm sure as soon as we hang up, I'll have 5 more.
Well, then you'll just have to join me another time. Thank you so much. I appreciated your questions, and I hope everybody watching appreciated them and enjoyed them as well. I will definitely have you back in the future because this has been a blast.
All right. My pleasure.